Good morning, everyone. Myself, Dr. Kajal Gupta, National Institute of Naturopathy, Pune. National Institute of Naturopathy what came into existence in 1986. Gandhiji has made National Institute of Naturopathy as a Bapu Bhavan and as its home. He stayed here for 156 days whenever he comes to Pune to take a treatment from Dr. Dinsha Mehta. To take the legacy of Gandhiji forward, National Institute of Naturopathy has taken an initiative to teach and provide wisdom about Gandhi's perspective on health with the theme of Insight of Gandhiji's on Self-Health Reliance and its other determinants of public health. We have started the webathon series on 2nd of October on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti, and we will be concluding it on 18th November, that is 3rd Naturopathy Day 2020. The sessions are quite interesting. We have eminent personalities with us, and to ask anything, all your queries, all your questions, you can put your comments in the comment section in Facebook or YouTube. So, and your questions will be addressed by the speakers at the end of the session or in the question answer segments. Moving to the next segment, in Sanskrit, the word prayer is prarthana. Pra means intensely and artha means to plead. When the desired task is undertaken after prayer to a deity, that is Ramanama, the task is blessed by the god. So, to take this task forward, that's the webathon series, to take the blessings of the god, we'll start today's session with a Gandhi prayer by Regional Outreach Bureau, Maharashtra and Goa.
मत कर तू अभिमाने बंदी झूठी तेरी शान रे मत कर तू अभिमान मत कर तू अभिमान बंदी झूठी तेरी शान रे मत कर तू अभिमान माया का अंधकार गिराना बाहर उजलाती घर खाना माया का अंधकार गिराना बाहर उजलाती घर खाना जिसको तू पहचान मत कर तू अभिमान मत कर तू अभिमान बन के झूठी तेरी शान मत कर तू अभिमान तेरे पास हीरे मोती मेरे मन मंदिर में चोरी तेरे पास हीरे मोती मेरे मन मंदिर में चोरी कौन हुआ भगवान बंदे मत कर तू अभिमान मत कर तू अभिमान बंदे झूठी तेरी शान रे मत कर तू अभिमान मत कर तू अभिमान बंदे झूठी तेरी शान रे मत कर तू
Mesmerizing. Thank you so much, artist Makran Masram, Regional Outreach Bureau, Pune, for the beautiful composition. Moving ahead, by growing frugality, we reap liberty, a golden harvest. Following the same, Gandhiji has a nature of being frugal. So we will start the another segment with a Gandhi Katha. Narrator of the story is our director, Professor Dr. K. Satyalakshmi, who has explained about how frugal the Gandhi's nature was.
Namaste, friends. Welcome to Gandhi Katha. Today we will see Mahatma Gandhi's habits of frugality, how he was using things in a very peculiar manner so that every bit of everything is properly, fully utilized. So, this was the period when he was imprisoned again. This is 1943. He was in jail, and there was a calendar where a sheet had to be removed daily for the next day to show. Daily Meera Ben used to do this, and after removing the sheet, she used to keep them in a particular place. Gandhiji was observing silence during that period every Monday. So on Mondays, whenever there are any visitors to him, he used to give them replies by writing on a piece of paper. So one day Meera Ben was not well, running fever. So the calendar sheet was changed by Manu Gandhi. But she did not preserve those calendar pieces, but threw them away. Gandhiji started searching for them and began to inquire everyone, including Kasturba, and he could not find them anywhere. Then Gandhiji asked who changed the calendar, but without knowing its value, threw them away. Then Gandhi asked her to go and search for those tiny sheets of paper. Along with her, the entire prisoners of the jail began searching. Finally, Gandhi Samadhi was found, but it was so crumpled beyond recognition. But Gandhi felt very happy and brought that paper into proper shape, and on the very same day, he used it for writing. So, this is the way Mahatma Gandhi used to make use of things. Thank you, friends, for your time.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the beautiful story. So the takeaway from the story is being frugal does not mean being cheap. It means being economical and avoiding the waste. And Gandhiji was perfect example for that. So moving next, vitality, the state of being strong, active, and energetic. So in the last few sessions, we are talking about different vitality indicators of a human body. And this year, naturopathy theme is nurturing vitality through naturopathy. So, as we have already discussed various vitality indicators, so today we will be talking about the mental health, mansik swasthya. So, I would request Dr. Jyoti to come and then present today's vitality indicator and throw some light on the mental health. I welcome you, ma'am.
Good morning. As we all know, this year's theme for the Naturopathy Day celebration is nurturing vitality through naturopathy. In last few sessions, we have been discussing about various physical, physiological, and environmental factors which impacts our vitality. From today onwards, we are going to discuss about some psychological and the mental factors in relation with the vitality. When it comes to the mental or the emotional health, relationships are one of the most important aspect of our life. And yet we tend to forget just how fundamentally crucial our connections or our relationships with others are for our own physical and the mental well-being. The people who are very well socially connected with their friends, family, and community are healthier, happier, and also live long compared to the people who are less connected. So, there's some of the questions like, how well connected are you with others? Do you have friends with a deep and the long lasting relationships? Or do you have many friends but only with the superficial relationships? Do you find it difficult to connect with others or to mingle with others? Or are you lonely and isolated? So, the answer to these questions will help you to assess how psychologically or emotionally strong and healthy you are. So it's not really about the number of relationships in your life, but it's the quality of your close relationships that matters. Because some deep, long lasting and relationships will definitely impact your life and your vitality in a positive way. At the same time, toxic and the negative relationships can affect your vitality in a negative way. So we all must strive and actually invest time to build and also to maintain the good quality relationships and the strong social bonds to maintain our complete well-being. So here we finish the discussions of today's, and our next session we are going to discuss about the various kinds of emotions that we feel in a day. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, to explain about how exactly mental health is important for a human body. So, till now we have talked about Panch Mahabhuta theory. Till now we have talked about the uh, too many vitality indicators of a human body, which actually it's in need to keep a healthy life. So, moving to the next segment. So, today we will be having a webinar on Gandhi's Earning to Heal Others by Dr. Mark Lindley. He was born in 1937 in Washington, D.C. He is a professor of eminence at the MGM University in Aurangabad. He was born in Washington in 1937. He serves as a research fellow at the Gandhi Research Foundation and as a visiting professor at Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar University. He was formerly the university chair professor in the School of Economics at the University of Hyderabad and has been for many years a student of history and theory of Western classical music. He has written or co-authored more than a dozen other scholarly books. Four of them were about Gandhi. Out of those four, one he has written Gandhi on health, particularly Gandhi as a healer, and notable Gandhians and more than 100 scholarly articles. So I would like him to come in the show and then share your thoughts, sir.
Yeah, ma'am. So, good morning to everyone. This is Tanmay here, and till Dr. Mark joins us, we thought we should just talk about what all we have done during the last 15 days, and also a prelude to Dr. Mark Lingler's topic, since you must have researched him. So, what are we going to talk about today?
So he is actually a Gandhi scholar. I mean, like in the Gandhi Research Foundation. So whatever interaction with me he has done till now, what I understood is like he has, being a Gandhi scholar or being not an Indian, and there is not much preaching of Gandhi in Western countries, but still he has taken Gandhi's preaching on health too seriously.
Okay.
Like he has taken it too seriously. And even in few of our conversations, I asked him like, how is the preaching of Gandhi's has been taken on health in Western countries? So he's like, actually they are not completely into the health, and like they have not taken his preachings in health at all. But the way of his self discipline, the way of his conscience and the strategy what he uses, so they have taken that, I mean, like at a par,
Okay.
somewhere at a par.
Okay.
So yeah, he is completely, I mean, like he himself do believe in naturopathy, he himself do believe in nature cure. So but his belief in nature cure, being a Washington resident,
yes.
came after he came to know about the Gandhi.
Okay.
Like before that he never knew like about what exactly Gandhi's preaching was.
Okay.
And then when we have talked about the actual, like what concept Gandhiji was using to treat people other than nature cure, so his main agenda, what he found from his research is that's the psychosomatic analysis. So he like started giving a placebo effect by either touching or by giving the mental stability or by telling people like, you know, the things are going to be okay.
Okay. Okay.
Right? And especially to those people who like either are avoided by the people or either are like, you know, just kept aside by the people. So he says that like we feel bad when we are in South Africa, when people, you know, when English people keeps us aside. So if we do the same thing with the, I mean, the people who are not good, it's not the right thing. Not the right thing. So yeah, he is a bit of.
So I believe you must have gone through this book written by him.
Yeah,
Gandhi on Health.
yes, he has explained actually. It's like his vocation to being a health practitioner was more deeper than his vocation to be a, I mean, a barrister or a lawyer or advocate, because he was, I mean, like he hardly practiced his advocacy, I mean, like for a long run, but till his last breath, he was practicing as a healer. So he was like his vocation was more, I mean, like towards the medical healer. So
okay, sir is here.
Have Dr. Mark. Good morning, sir.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay.
So I welcome you, sir, for the webinar that's Gandhi's Earning to Heal Others.
Thank you.
Yes. So over to you, sir. You can start with the lecture.
Well, I did not write the title of this talk, but I like it. There is lots of documentary evidence that Gandhi's vocation to be a medical healer was deeper than his vocation to practice law. It had been for the sake of financial security that he had studied jurisprudence. He practiced law for 20 years and then quit forever, though still engaged in politics, whereas his medical healing of sick individuals, once he started doing it, continued throughout the rest of his life. A clear piece of evidence is the following set of excerpts from a description of Gandhi written in 1940 by his secretary, Mahadev Desai. Quote, nursing those who are ailing mentally and physically has been a passion with him throughout his life. Though he chose public law as his profession, and then public life has claimed the bulk of his time, the passion for caring for ailing individuals has developed from what it once was, a hobby, to a sort of spiritual need. When we are away from headquarters, the letters to be placed on the top of his day's post must be from these individuals. His most concentrated political work, his most important talk or interview may be interrupted by anyone seeking his advice about the diet, bath, and treatment of these patients. End of quote. Back in 1908 in Africa, a good friend of Gandhi's, Hermann Kallenbach, mentioned in a letter to a doctor that Gandhi was thinking of resettling for a while in England in order to study medicine professionally in London. Corroboration of this fact is in a British book published in 1908 and entitled A Winter in South Africa. The author of the book said in regard to Gandhi that, quote, he practices as a barrister, but not content with one profession, is hoping to visit London again to study medicine and give his sons wider opportunities for realizing the ideal with which he has inspired them. Gandhi scholars know that the basic ideal with which he inspired himself and most of his sons was that of rendering service. I think he must have felt in 1908 that he could serve people better by practicing medicine professionally than by practicing law. During his visit to London in 1909, Gandhi wrote in a letter to his friend Henry Pollock that a certain doctor in London, quote, tells me that in the course of his studies, he must have killed about 50 frogs. An examination in physiology without this, he tells me, is not possible. If this is so, I have absolutely no desire to go in for medical studies. Now, I suspect that the reason why Gandhi had thought he could earn the MD degree without doing dissections was that Anna Kingsford had done it that way in Paris. She was a spiritually vibrant mystic, much admired by Gandhi on that account. He admired, for instance, her precept that in order to be made in the image of God, the individual must be spiritually both man and woman. Her final thesis for the MD degree, published in 1880 in French, argued that humans are naturally meant to be non-carnivorous and that tuberculosis, gout, and epilepsy are caused by eating too much meat. Gandhi not only read the English translation of that thesis, entitled The Perfect Way in Diet, a treatise advocating a return to the natural and ancient food of our race, but he also became, in the mid-1890s, an agent for its sale. I am, however, obliged for the sake of truthfulness to mention that Anna Kingsford was often in poor health, and she died at the age of 41. Another notable expectation of Gandhi's when he was planning to study in London for the MD degree was that it would be feasible for him to integrate what he would learn there with what he had already learned from reading English versions of 2 German books, which had been given to him a year or 2 before by a good friend of his, who was to become his son Harilal's father-in-law. Those 2 books had, Gandhi recalled in 1947, made him, quote, a confirmed convert to nature cure, unquote. And he never lost his regard for those books. One of them had been written in about 1890 by Louis Kuhne, who had in 1883 established a hydrotherapy. His English translation was entitled The New Science of Healing, or the Doctrine of the Unity of Diseases, forming the basis of a uniform method of cure, meaning for all the diseases, without medicines and without operations. The uniform method was as follows. The patient, sitting in a tub filled with cool water, 10 to 14 degrees centigrade, up to the level of the seat, dips a coarse linen cloth into the water underneath and gently washes his or her genitals with that cloth, making use of lots of water. No higher part of the body should come into contact with the water. Only the outer and not the inner pubic parts should be bathed, and there should be no sharp rubbing, but only gentle washing with as much water as possible. Quote, the duration of this bathing is 10 to 60 minutes, depending on the age and strength of the patient. The chosen parts of the body are particularly suitable because most of the nerves in a human body converge here, so that the entire nervous system of the organism can be positively influenced in this way. End of quote. Now, the other nature cure book, which impressed Gandhi so highly, was entitled Return to Nature, Paradise Regained. Its original German title was nearly 50 words long and said that the only way to heal any and all illnesses and sufferings of the body, of the spirit, and of the soul was to adopt a certain way of life, taking advantage of, among other things, the strength of earth as the most important healing means of nature. This book had been published in 1896. Its author, Adolf Just, had begun in 1895 to establish mud cure clinics in Germany, which were quite successful commercially. Gandhi, in the fullness of time, became a discriminating student of the teachings of these and other nature cure advocates. Here is some of what he said in the 1920s in a chapter of his autobiography praising nature cures. He said, quote, "Those who purchase Adolf Just's book on the strength of this chapter of mine should not take everything in it to be gospel truth. A writer almost always presents one aspect of a case, whereas every case can be seen from no less than 7 points of view, all of which are probably correct by themselves, but not correct at the same time and in the same circumstances. And then many books are written with a view to gaining customers and earning name and fame. Let those, therefore, who read such books as these do so with discernment." Now, Gandhi himself never merchandised nature cure, but only fashioned his own version of it in order to try to heal sick people. He said that the term nature cure, quote, "implies that the treatment should be the cheapest and the simplest possible, and that nature cure, quote, connotes a way of life which has to be learnt. It is not a drug cure as we understand it." This last point would, of course, be part of his justification for regarding it as more natural than pharmaceutical remedies. He said that the ideal naturopath, quote, "recognizes physical, mental, and spiritual ills and treats them mainly by developing inner powers. Those inner powers would include what an ordinary Western doctor would tag as the client's psychosomatic capacities. For a materialistically inclined such doctor, the word inner would here mean physically within the organism. But for Gandhi, it might refer also to a non-physical thing for which the standard term in English is soul, but in Hindi, with some different connotations, Atman. Having just now mentioned pharmaceutical remedies and psychosomatic cures, I am reminded of Gandhi's attitude toward homeopathy, which is a pharmacologically oriented kind of treatment, and thus unlikely to appeal to Gandhi, that had been invented by a German doctor in the early 19th century. One of its two basic premises is that a diseased person can always be cured by ingesting a substance which would produce in a healthy person symptoms similar to those of the disease, but would not actually make the healthy person sick. The other basic precept is that an extremely tiny amount of the substance will achieve the cure. Gandhi is known to have referred to homeopathy on 6 occasions, each time in a letter. Those references reveal his open-mindedness toward empirical evidence. Here are excerpts from some of them. In 1933, he told a practitioner of homeopathy, "I have never been able to take kindly to it, though some of my friends have often recommended it to me. I have noticed, too, that these friends themselves, at critical moments, have given up homeopathy and gone to allopathy, Western-type medical practice. Though I should like to believe the contrary, I am driven to the conclusion that allopathy, although it has great limitations and much superstition about it, is still the most universal and justifiably the most popular system. It is an all-inclusive system. It can well include homeopathy, biochemistry, and the latest nature cures. If, therefore, allopathy rids itself of the worship of mammon, which has overtaken most of human activities, and if it could exclude vivisection and other practices which I call black, and liberally take advantage of the new methods discovered by lay people, it would become all-satisfying." In 1936, Gandhi told Gangabain Vaidya, a close associate of his at Sabarmati, Quote, I was pained to read about Bakhubai, Gagubain's nephew. You cannot leave him as long as he is bedridden. Tell Yugatram, a certain Ayurvedic physician, evidently in the one treating Bakhubai, to consult a homeopath. Homeopathy has not won my faith, but it helped Devdas, Gandhi's youngest son, and a medical specialist whom we met here is all praise for it. In any case, it will do no harm, and it may do some good. In 1944, he said, I wish I could have faith in homeopathy and biochemical medicines, but I don't. Now I am thinking of taking allopathic drugs to get rid of the hookworms and the amoebae, which Sushila Nayar, his primary care physician, was telling him were the cause of his health problems at that time. Now, modern assessments of homeopathy, conducted thoroughly and independently by the Swiss Federal Health Office, the French National Authority for Health, the European Union's Science Advisory Council, the British House of Commons Science and Technology Committee, and the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council, have concluded that homeopathy is ineffective. And the World Health Organization has warned against using it to try to treat severe diseases such as HIV and malaria. So it's fair to say that 21st century allopathy, which, since it strives to be evidence-based, does sometimes embrace nature cure and acupuncture and some other methods developed in non-Western cultures, does not embrace homeopathy. In a few moments, I will cite some evidence about Gandhi's attitude in the mid-1940s toward contemporary Ayurvedic methods and toward naturopathy. But let me first, since my talk is mainly about Gandhi as a medical healer, describe 5 cases of his achievements as such in the first 3 decades of the century. My case number 1 is his self-curative use of mud packs, as taught by Adolf Just, after he had been assaulted and battered in 1908 by some men who felt that he had compromised too much in a political settlement he had negotiated with General Smuts. Gandhi convalesced in the home of a friend whose son recalled years later, quote, I can see Mr. Gandhi now, propped up with pillows, his lacerated face swathed with bandages, unable to speak, and writing answers to questions on a slate before him. The healing of the wounds was slow, and he got impatient. Imagine that, Gandhi impatient. He told my father that if he could get a plaster of clean mud on his face, he was sure it would help. So off I was sent with spade and bucket to clean away the topsoil and get uncontaminated lower earth for the plaster. We made the mud plasters, and my mother applied them. Well, do we remember the consternation of the doctor when he found out what had been done? But in 2 days, Mr. Gandhi was sitting out on the veranda in the study armchair and eating fruit. Most MDs would indeed consider it quite risky to put mud on an open sore. A lot would depend on exactly which mud is chosen. Perhaps it could indeed contain a chemical of therapeutic value, on whether it has been sterilized, irradiated, and analyzed chemically for toxins, and on the extent to which the patient might have developed after exposures to similar stuff immunity to potentially harmful organisms or viruses in it. Now, my case number 2 is an expert display during one of Gandhi's prison terms in Africa of a skill which he had mastered in his military ambulance corps work. An account of it was written with palpably racist overtones by a fellow prisoner of his. It describes how an illiterate black African prison attendant was, quote, stung by a scorpion and came howling to Bapu, who, quote, without wasting a moment, washed that part of the Negro's hand thoroughly clean with water, dried it, and then started sucking the poison out of the sting. He sucked with such vim and gusto that much of the poison was drawn out, and the poor man began to feel better. Then Bapu applied various other treatments, and the Negro got rid of his pain, unquote. My case number 3 is Gandhi's cure of Kasturba's dire illness in December of 1908. An MD had misdiagnosed her as suffering from pernicious anemia, and she was in grave condition as the doctor's curative methods were not working at all. Here is an eyewitness account of how Gandhi succeeded where the MD had failed. Mr. Gandhi put everything on one side and developed everything to her. During one of her conscious periods, he asked her if she trusted him absolutely. She replied in the affirmative. Then he said, "Will you let me try to help you?" This she agreed to, placing herself entirely in his hands. After this, he stopped all medications and refused to allow the doctor to try to force his patient to take meat extracts. The doctor abused Mr. Gandhi, who, however, stood firm. For the next 2 weeks, Mr. Gandhi scarcely left his wife's side. He fed her at intervals with pure lemon juice, and no other food or drink of any kind was given to her. He poured his calm energy into her and did for her all the little delicate duties that a very sick woman required. For these 2 weeks, Mrs. Gandhi semi-consciously struggled for life, but by the end of that time, a marked change was noticeable. The conscious periods were much longer, sleep became more natural, the dropsical swellings became less, and the eyes began to look clearer. Then, by slow degrees, a little fruit and milk were given, and lastly, vegetables without condiments and cereals, and without a single relapse, Mrs. Gandhi slowly but surely returned to health. End of quote. Now, one reason for Gandhi's success in this case was undoubtedly his wife's absolute trust. He could rally her psychosomatic resilience better than the doctor could. My case number 4 is Gandhi's equally amazing cure in 1912 of Rauji Bhai Manibhai Patel's rheumatism. Here is an abridged and edited version of a translation of Patel's account, which was originally some 20 years after the cure, in Gujarati. Quote, "I was rheumatic since childhood. The doctors had tried numerous treatments, but the symptoms kept erupting. When I joined Phoenix Ashram in 1912, Gandhiji was permanently living there. The first thing that happened on my joining Phoenix was a drastic change in my food habits. Earlier, I had eaten impulsively. No one had ever thought of restraint. Large doses of oral medication had suppressed the superficial pain. But now, I gradually stopped eating food grains and supped only on fruit. Within a month of my experimenting with the fruit diet, all my joints became rheumatic. I could barely go to the toilet. Gandhiji knew everything because he always took upon himself the responsibility to feed and nurse the sick. He was the guardian of both the body and the soul. He kept me on a fruit diet, but avoiding sour fruits. He had me eat a lot of tomatoes and provided oiling to the system with olive oil. Early in the morning, Gandhi would put his hand on my head. What affection, what comfort did I experience in that touch? He would examine my mouth and tongue. After cleaning up and washing, I would go to a separate room where Gandhiji would come at the appointed time. He would prepare about 2 liters of lukewarm, whitish, soapy water solution, add about 25 grams of castor oil, and give me a douche of that solution. After this cleansing of the bowels, I had to sit in a tub full of water for half an hour, massaging my stomach. I then bathed with cold water. This treatment was administered every alternate day. On the intermittent day, there would be a steam bath, and thus the blood in my body was gradually purified. The diet was now altered to wheat chapatis, olive oil, and ripe tomatoes. My pain was reduced, but became mobile. One day in the knees, another day in the wrists, and another day in the back or in the finger joints. However, it was an essential part of the treatment to continue to work and not to be bedridden. The daily routine was as follows: 6 to 7 a.m., ablutions and bowel cleaning, etc. 7 to 8, with the students at school. 8 to 9, treatment, douche, etc., or steam bath. 9 to 10, kitchen work. 10 to 12, lunch and rest. 12 to 2, work as a compositor at the press for the journal Indian Opinion. 2 to 4, picking fruits or preparing plantation beds in the gardens. 4 to 5, work in the kitchen. 5 to 6, supper. 6 to 7, relaxation or strolling around. 7 to 7:30, prayers. 7:30 to 8:30, conversation and discussion on various topics with Gandhiji. 9 to 6 a.m. the next day, rest and sleep. During illness, when healthy, I would get up at 4 a.m. My treatment continued for 3 months. Gandhi rarely left the ashram. As I recall now his exacting care, I feel overwhelmed. During the initial stage of the treatment, when I was unable to sit up, he would examine my stool after the douche to see if the food was getting digested, and then he would clean the pot himself. I can compare his care only with that of my mother, who had devotedly looked after my needs and regardless of the uncleanliness entailed. The soul-filling experience is fresh in my mind even after 20 years. He means the experience with Gandhi. I was cured of rheumatism for good. End of quote. Now, it seems to me that if the arthritis was due to autoimmune inflammation, then the cure must have been psychosomatic, and I consider it arguable that such an intimate and intense relationship as Patel recalled with Gandhi might indeed have such a physiological result. The cause of the rheumatism could, however, have been a food allergy, and indeed Gandhi seems to have probed to identify it by eliminating one dietary component at a time. If we had confirming evidence that Patel continued to avoid the dangerous to him kind of fruit, this would render this explanation quite likely. Allergy to one or more fruits is not uncommon, and an allergic reaction of inflammation in multiple joints is also very common. My case number 5 is a cure performed by Gandhi in India in 1930, according to during one of his detentions there. The superintendent, quote, Major Martin had appointed a Maharashtri named Datoba to cook for Bapu. The poor fellow suffered from pain in his foot and limped noticeably as he went about his work. One day, Bapu spoke to Major Martin about this. Major Martin gave some medicine, but it did no good. A month went by, and then Bapu said to Major Martin, have you any objection to my treating this man? My treating this man? None whatsoever, said the Major. Bapu said, diet is the most important part of my treatment. I shall provide him with the special things I want him to eat. Major Martin agreed to this also. Bapu started giving treatment to Datoba. He began by keeping him on a fast for a few days and then cleaned out his stomach. The writer should have said cleaned out his lower intestines with an enema. Then for a few days, he kept him on nothing but vegetables. Later on, he kept making adjustments in his diet as occasion arose. The lame man began to improve. He said to me, the writer was a fellow prisoner of Gandhi's, I have been bothered by this pain for years, and now look how much better my foot is. I find no difficulty in walking whatever. I find it so surprising to be able to walk like other men. Now let me come please to what will be perhaps the most interesting part of my talk. It has to do with the fact that the reason why the Viceroy released Gandhi in May of 1944 from detention in the Aga Khan Palace was that Gandhi's health condition was dire, and the Viceroy was afraid that if Gandhi died while in detention, there would be a vast amount of political trouble. However, Gandhi was by no means willing to die at that time, so he had to decide how to try to recover his good health. At first, he considered mainly allopathy, represented very well by Sushila Nayar, and Ayurveda. But then in the course of 1945, he tried nature cure as well and was impressed with the result. Let me share with you some of the documentary evidence in regard to this episode of his life. He told a friend on November 30th, 1944, quote, Ramesh is a very nice person, but he failed to reveal the wonders of Ayurveda to me. He is hardworking. He tries to compete with allopathy. A great deal of diligence and experience is required to compete with allopathy. I have grown very weak. Sushila Bain, of course, recommends her line of treatment. I am still keen on getting well with the help of Ayurveda or my own methods of treatment. Let us see what I decide to do. In a statement to the press, which Gandhi issued a day later, he said, Dr. Sushila Nayar assures me that there is nothing physically wrong with me except that my old friends, the hookworms and the amoebae, have not left me. And here then is a salient passage from a letter written by Gandhi on January 4th, 1945. I am reaping what I sowed. I went on taking Ayurvedic medicines without thinking and had to suffer the consequences. I am now getting rid of the poison. I am daily improving and getting stronger. Well, equally salient are the following remarks from a letter he sent in that same month of January 1945 to a representative of the Indian Institute of Natural Therapeutics. I have met most naturopaths, he said. They do not agree with one another, and they are obstinate and even lazy. You will now see why I cannot preside or be at your conference. I do want naturopathy to make real progress. He had by no means, however, given up hope for such progress. Early in December of 1944, he had said in a letter written in Gujarati to a colleague who was dealing with an epidemic in a village, quote, "You will soon get lots of drugs, but they will not be very helpful. Revive people's knowledge of nature cure remedies. Local medicinal drugs should be made available. Give rice water. If you mix jaggery with it, it will provide more energy. Teach people the rules of hygiene. If food is stopped to people suffering from fever or diarrhea, and if they are put on boiled water, then more than 50% of the cases will recover. I have suggested only the simplest remedies." End of quote. Now, a few weeks before then, Gandhi had sent a letter to a colleague who was thinking of setting up a nature cure clinic. Gandhi's own health at that time had been so very frail that he couldn't offer personal help, but he did offer advice, including the following. The halls for treatment and experiment should be surrounded by decent huts for the residents of patients and children entrusted to our cure. The sanatorium should grow fruit, flowers, food grains, and vegetables. It should have cattle sheds and roads good enough for vehicles. It should also have a gymnasium, a tank for bathing, and other facilities. Patients should be given such treatment as does not involve the use of electricity. And then after having written those various letters in 1945 and in January of 1944 and January of 1945, Gandhi spent 90 days in August, September, October, and November of 1945 residing at the Nature Cure Clinic and Sanatorium in Pune, which is hosting this webinar talk of mine, and taking a course of treatments there. Those treatments clearly improved his health. He gained more than 2.5 kilos of weight, and he felt much better when he left than he had felt when he had come in. And so, in 1946, he spent 9 days in a certain village setting up and directing himself a nature cure center, which he then left in charge of a designated medical instructor and a designated administrative manager. Here are some of the instructions he left for carrying on without him. Quote, "The treatment is to be limited to sun bath, hip bath, friction bath, kuna bath, mud poultice, massage, and fomentation with hot water. However, Ramanama, that is, saying the name of Lord Rama over and over again, is the king of all treatments. Everyone should rise at 4 a.m., and the morning prayer should be held at 4:30. All should maintain a diary. The tub for the hip bath should be washed with water and hot ashes after every use. A clean brush should be used for scrubbing with the ashes. All kitchen work and cleaning should be done by the inmates themselves. The food should be the simplest possible." Perhaps one reason why repeated Ramanama might help Gandhi's patients could have been that to take religious advice from such an incredibly great counselor could rally one's psychosomatic powers of recovery rather than to take the advice of a normal doctor. Moreover, a patient dying while calmly repeating the name Rama would spend his or her last moments in a serene way, which all good doctors and friends would prefer to see. Some brief excerpts from Gandhi's comments in regard to a few of the villagers whose treatments he supervised during his 9 days at that clinic will show that he had a sense of limits to the curative powers of nature cure, especially under conditions where he did not have a modicum of personal familiarity with the clients. Here are some of his notes about one of his cases at that village clinic, indicating that such was the case. Quote, "What has she tied to her abdomen? In the first place, she should not gird up so tight. She should lie prostrate and naked in a solitary place. She should give up eating bread and subsist on milk and fruit. Does she pass stools? With whom has she come? Does she have anyone at home? End of quote. At that time, at that clinic, he was just as unfamiliar with the clients as most of the primary care physicians working nowadays in hospitals in the USA are with many of their clients. The hospital managers there in the USA insist that the primary care physicians spend on average only 12, or in relatively better hospitals, 15 minutes per appointment on average. It is a scandalous aspect of American healthcare and hospitals nowadays. I think there ought to be a law stipulating that the specified average must be at least 20 minutes. Even better in practice might be to allow the primary care physicians as much time as with each client as they like. One of the findings of very careful statistical research conducted in the last few years at the University of Chicago by Professor David Meltzer, the name is spelled Meltzer, who has an MD degree and a PhD degree in economics, has been that people who have a primary care physician with whom they have plenty of leisurely appointments fare so much better health-wise in the long run that their healthcare insurance companies make more profit from insuring them than from insuring individuals who have only short appointments with primary care physicians. Whatever kind of healthcare you may be engaged in, if helping others to improve their health is a top concern for you, then you should try to figure out a way to earn their trust and to understand all the relevant circumstances of their health problems. But let me return now to my assigned topic of Gandhi's yearning to heal others. The following remarks show that in his village nature cure clinic in 1946, he was alert to the differences between getting better and a complete cure. He said in regard to a certain case, which had been reported to him, I would advise this. She should take sunbath in the nude, followed by a hip bath and a friction bath in cold water. Her diet should consist of only fruit juice and milk or buttermilk. If she does this regularly, she is sure to get better. Complete cure is rather difficult. She may possibly be cured if she has faith in Rama. Here are his remarks about a case where he advised a more intrusive procedure than nature cure could provide. He must get himself admitted to the hospital. If he is willing to do that and wants to have a note from us for the hospital, he may go with one provided by us. There is no other remedy for hernia. A strap belt can also be worn. If he does not want to do all this, he should surrender to Rama and rest content. Here are Gandhi's remarks about a case in regard to which the views of most 21st century MDs would probably differ from his views at that time and under those circumstances. He said, quote, "What is the use of removing cataracts from a poor person's eyes? One should live with it. Recite Ramanama, and when the time is up, depart with Ramanama on one's lips. If this cannot be done, she may be taken to a hospital and have the cataracts removed. I do not remember any nature cure treatment for cataract." Let me mention here, however, that one of Gandhi's general underlying precepts in this last case, namely that the doctor should take into account the quality of life which a client may reasonably be hoped to have as a result of the treatment being mooted, was sensible. The decisions which responsible doctors have to make as to how to proceed in problematic cases are often based on informal estimates of how this or that procedure under consideration seems likely to affect the client's quality of life. There were rarely house calls from that village nature cure clinic in 1946, but there was in effect an equivalent to house calls the following year, 1947, during Gandhi's walking tour of Noakhali in the wake of the religious violence which had been suffered there. Here are some excerpts from Narayan Desai's account, written years later, of Gandhi's tour of Noakhali. Quote, "During the disturbances, many hospitals were burnt down and not a doctor was now in sight for miles together. Gandhiji found in this situation an opportunity to suggest nature cures for small ailments. For many families, he became a family physician. In a short time, his reputation as a nature cure expert spread. Villagers spoke of the healing touch of a man of God. He had immense faith in nature cure, but did not impose it on others. Once, 2 Muslim boys with Kala Azar, that is black fever, were brought to him. He called Dr. Sushila Nayar dad, who had set up a dispensary in a nearby village, she was made to walk 6 miles daily to administer injections to the 2 boys. My main task in this talk has been to show that Gandhi's vocation for medical healing was deeper than his vocation to practice law. I hope that this fact may serve to inspire healthcare workers of all kinds in India to deepen their vocations. If time permits, I would like to discuss briefly one additional aspect of Gandhi's nature cure approach to promoting good health, namely fasting. A long essay on health and healthcare, which he wrote in 1913 in Gujarati, recommends it as part of the treatment for certain diseases and includes the following remarks, quote, "Fever has its origin generally in some stomach trouble. The first step to be taken, therefore, is fasting. The notion that a weak person or one suffering from fever will be weakened by fasting is entirely mistaken. By stopping all intake of food, we give the stomach a chance to do its curative work. The fast, therefore, must be continued for at least a day or longer. Kuna baths should be administered during and after the fast." Gandhi knew, of course, about the Ayurvedic tradition of Langanam, that is, of fasting perhaps once a month or maybe even once a fortnight for a day or so in order to preserve good health. In 1929, he advised Mirabane to take, quote, "an occasional fast or semi-fast even when you are feeling well." And 2 years later, he told her that, quote, "an occasional fast at least once per month is a good thing, it seems, even for lightweight people." Now, the word fast as a noun or verb has often been used without saying clearly what is meant. A fairly clear definition is included in an article published in 2013 by 2 MDs at a first-rate clinic in Berlin. In that article, fasting is defined as, quote, "voluntary abstinence from solid food and from stimulants like coffee or nicotine for a limited period of time." And it is said to depend on, quote, "the person's ability to meet the body's requirements for macro and micronutrients during a limited period of either shortage or absence of food by using almost exclusively the body's energy reserves without endangering health. During fasting, intake of food in forms of vegetable broth and vegetable or fruit juice should not exceed 500 kilocalories per day. When fasting is done properly, one should experience a good level of vitality and absence of hunger." End of quote. Well, I myself have seldom fasted, and never for more than one day. I would like to know the views of you nature cure experts on this matter. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, sir. So, in naturopathy, we talk about Panch Mahabhuta concept. Like we have 5 different main elements. Out of that, one is space. So, yesterday we talked about the vitality indicator of space, where we relate the air in the, space in the body relates to fasting. So, yes, fasting is one of the major therapeutic tool in the naturopathy. So thank you so much, sir. The takeaway from your particular talk is, so Gandhi's vocation towards the medical healer was more deeper than the vocation to the barrister or to the advocacy. So, like, I just want to know, what exactly. Okay, so we'll have the question answer session. I'll just keep my question with me right now. So I'll keep them safe. So I now will be having a very small session of vitality in Hindi. So later we will be having a small session of question answer. So there I'll ask you whatever queries I have personally and then whatever the viewers have asked you. So I just want you to be with us. We'll have a small session in Hindi. So once that session is over, then we'll have a question answer session.
Okay, see you soon. Thank you.
Yes. So I would like to welcome Dr. Jyoti Kumbar for the small vitality session of mental health in Hindi.
जैसे कि आप सभी जानते हैं, इस वर्ष प्राकृतिक चिकित्सा दिवस समारोह की संकल्पना प्राकृतिक चिकित्सा से जीवन शक्ति का संवर्धन करना या पोषण करना यह है। पिछले कुछ सत्रों से हम जीवन ऊर्जा पर विभिन्न शारीरिक या पर्यावरणीय कारकों के परिणाम के बारे में चर्चा कर रहे थे। आज से हम कुछ मनोवैज्ञानिक और भावनात्मक कारकों के बारे में और उनके जीवन ऊर्जा पर प्रभाव के बारे में चर्चा करने जा रहे हैं। जब मानसिक या भावनात्मक स्वास्थ्य की बात आती है तो रिश्ते हमारे जीवन का सबसे महत्वपूर्ण पहलू है, और इसके बावजूद हम कई बार ये भूल जाते हैं कि हमारे दूसरे लोगों के साथ संबंध हमारे खुद के स्वास्थ्य के लिए, शारीरिक और मानसिक स्वास्थ्य के लिए कितना महत्वपूर्ण है। जो लोग अपने दोस्तों, अपने परिवार और समुदाय से अच्छे से जुड़े रहते हैं, वो स्वस्थ और खुश रहते हैं, उनकी तुलना में जो लोग अपने दोस्तों और परिवार से कम जुड़े रहते हैं। तो कुछ सवाल, जैसे आप दूसरों से कितने हद तक जुड़े हैं? क्या आपके पास गहरे संबंधों वाले मित्र हैं, या आपके पास कई मित्र हैं लेकिन उनके साथ सिर्फ ऊपरी और सतह का संबंध है? क्या आप दूसरों के साथ घुलने मिलने के लिए और उनके साथ जुड़ने के लिए कठिनाई महसूस करते हैं, या आप अकेले और अलग रहते हैं? इन कुछ सवालों के जवाब आपको अपने भावनात्मक और मानसिक स्वास्थ्य का आईना दिखा सकते हैं। आपके जीवन में रिश्तों की संख्या कितनी है यह नहीं महत्वपूर्ण है, लेकिन आपके करीबी संबंधों की गहराई और उसकी गुणवत्ता जरूर मायने रखती है। और इसीलिए हम सबको अपना स्वास्थ्य, अपना शारीरिक और मानसिक स्वास्थ्य बनाए रखने के लिए अपने दोस्तों, परिवार और समुदाय के साथ अच्छे और गहरे संबंध बनाए रखने के लिए और लंबे समय तक उन्हें बनाए रखना जैसे जरूरी है, तो उसके लिए भरसक प्रयत्न करना चाहिए और इस बात प्राथमिकता भी देनी चाहिए। और इसी के साथ हम आज की चर्चा खत्म कर रहे हैं, और हमारे अगले सत्र में हम कुछ भावनाओं के बारे में चर्चा करेंगे, तो हमारे साथ जुड़े रहिए। नमस्ते।
So, thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us about the vitality in Hindi. So, we'll be moving to the question answer session, sir. So,
Yes,
shall I
please.
ask the first question?
Yes, please. Let's go.
Yes. So, as I was curious before, the Gandhiji's vocation to medical healer was deeper than the vocation to his advocacy. So, what exactly helped Gandhiji to console himself for loss of his vocation to become a professional healer?
It's a good question. In the short run, he was not consoled. He was upset. This is clear to me from the excessively sharp remarks about Western medical practice that he made in the pamphlet entitled Hind Swaraj, which he wrote on board the ship that took him back from London to Africa in 1909. He wrote it in such a state of passion that his right hand sometimes became cramped from writing too hard, and so he would write the next page with his left hand. This is shown by the slants of the handwriting in the manuscript. I think that essay of his has many defects of detail in its arguments because it was written with not enough calm reflection. And I think that one of the two main reasons for that was that his hopes of earning an MD degree had been dashed by the apparent impossibility of doing it without dissecting live frogs. The other main reason, you don't have to dissect live frogs today, by the way. They do this with videos instead.
Yes.
The other reason for Gandhi's dismay at that time was his encounter in London with Savarkar, but that's not our topic today. Now, in the long run, Gandhi arrived at a sensibly balanced attitude of critical appreciation for allopathy. That would be my answer to your question. He was not consoled in the short run, and it took him many years to work out a reasonable position. Yeah.
So maybe his the non-violence thing came in between, that he didn't want to kill frogs, and then he didn't want, he has just left the thing to be a medical degree holder.
Yes.
Okay. So the next question is, does Gandhiji's preaching on health has been taken in Western countries the same as in India?
Alas, it seems to me that practically no one there pays any attention at all to it. I have tried and failed again and again to arrange for guest lectures on this topic in the USA and in Germany. I have given plenty of well-received lectures on other topics in both of those countries, but Gandhi is not regarded there as a possible source of insight in regard to health or healthcare.
Okay. So, but still in other perspectives, he is, not on the perspective of health.
On nonviolence, politics, colonialism, yes. No question about it. Spiritual matters, yes. Healthcare, no, they just don't know about this. It just doesn't seem to them possible.
So, being professionally, he was a lawyer, and but still, he was treating people. So, was that not illegal? I mean, he was not a degree holder, or he was still, had interest to treat people. So, was not that, opposite to the rules?
I don't think he ever did anything strong enough. He didn't give strong medicines. So the fact that he was very limited in the way he treated people protected him from being subjected to objections that he had done intrusive things to them that hurt them. Yeah. I think that would be
As you said, like he never merchandised
and he never took any money.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So, okay. So, the next question by our viewer is, can you please throw some light on the apostle of applied human ecology?
Well, that is the title of a book I admire very much, Triloki Nath Kusho's book, Mahatma Gandhi, an apostle of applied human ecology. Yeah, written 25 years ago. But I myself don't use the phrase human ecology because it has been used by various writers to mean various quite different things. I think one aspect of what Kusho meant by it is that Gandhi was, in a certain sense, a humanist. He valued human life more than he did the lives of, say, dogs and snakes. In 1947, he approved of using a gun to kill rabid dogs infected with rabies, before they might bite humans and give them the disease. And in 1944, he approved, for the same kind of reason, of killing poisonous snakes at Sevagram, rather than capturing them and setting them free in the forest. Let me mention here, by the way, that our planet Earth is not endangered by modern Western civilization. If that civilization causes the extinction of humankind, the planet will get on perfectly well without us, just as it did after various other biologically destructive geological changes in the course of the last billion years. So it's a human concern to deal with these issues of ecological decline of the capacity of the Earth's environment to support humankind. Yeah.
So it's similar to the question. So I read somewhere that he was also, in favor of euthanasia, even though he was like humanist, as you said. Like he was okay to kill the snakes and the rabid dogs. So was the euthanasia of the same, concept in his mind?
Which concept do you mean? Can you be a little clearer?
Euthanasia, sir. So the killing the person, medically.
Yes, well, there's the famous incident in the mid-1920s of the calf that became agonizingly ill at his ashram, and he administered euthanasia to that calf. Yes. And he was criticized, but he would not accept any of that criticism in that case. Gandhi supported euthanasia in cases of a person or a calf. He was very explicit about this, being on their deathbed with agonizing pain. There seems to be no hope of recovery. You cut the pain short by administering euthanasia, non-violently. Yes. He was very clear about that. It's not very well known, but it was very well known at the time. There were a lot of objections to it.
Yes. Okay. So the next question is, we have many stories where he treated people with nature cure treatments. Can you share any anecdote or a story which can make us understand his concept of mental health or psychosomatic concepts?
That is a very good question, and I'm grateful for all of your good questions. I haven't done any research on this matter of Gandhi treating mental health as such, but I can say that Gandhi's concept of the Atman, which he regarded as the divine aspect of human nature, was that when it is isolated from the ocean of the Para-Atman, it's like a feeble little droplet of water that will shrivel up. But when it's joined in love with the mighty ocean, it partakes of that power. I think Gandhi felt that a good way of the droplet getting back to the ocean would be by the person doing work that is useful to other people, not paid work that is useful to other people. Here is an eyewitness account of a 10-minute interview which Gandhi in 1945, on a Monday, his silent day of the week, granted to a gentleman who had a distressing emotional problem and came to Sevagram to ask him about it. Quote, Bapuji wrote out his answers on a slate. I too was present at the interview, the writer said. The interviewer eloquently explained his problem to Bapuji for 7 minutes and sought Bapuji's advice. Bapu wrote the reply, quote, the fact that you talked so long on the problem shows you have not understood the problem, end of quote. The gentleman was dumbfounded. Bapuji wrote again, a worker goes straight to the practical difficulty, end of quote. The gentleman felt humble and said meekly, I have difficulties, Bapuji. Bapu wrote in reply, go and work. Work solves your difficulties. The 10 minutes were over and Bapuji turned away his face. Now, this reminds me of the fact that when Gandhi was dealing with Manibhai Patel's rheumatism, he would never let him be bedridden. To do some clearly useful work every day, notwithstanding your health problem, can be part of the cure. I'm reminded also of a wonderful fictional character in a great novel by Charles Dickens entitled David Copperfield and set in the first half of the 19th century. The character has an emotional crisis, not David, another character, an emotional crisis whenever the historical fact that King Charles II of England had been beheaded back in 1685 is mentioned. That fixation of his is an abiding emotional illness for this fellow, which he clearly acknowledges as such. But at other times, he is quite insightful, not a genius like Einstein, but smart. And it is he, this character, who figures out who is the man in the story who has been deviously causing a lot of trouble in the lives of David Copperfield and some of the other characters. The moral of the story is that in some cases, a person who is mentally unbalanced about one thing can be perfectly okay when dealing with other things, and that if she spends a lot of time and effort functioning sanely in regard to those other things, then the mental health problem may become a lot less bothersome. That's what I would have to contribute to this discussion.
So the Gandhiji's concept was, if the God has given you, like hands and the legs, so you are supposed to work with them.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So the other question by a viewer is, a viewer requests you to share the Gandhiji's experiment with diet for nutritional sufficiency in working class women and such socially disadvantaged sections of society at that time.
Repeat it again. I didn't understand a couple of the words. Just a little slower, please.
Yeah. So the viewer wants you to request to share Gandhiji's experiments with diet for nutritional sufficiency in working class women and such socially disadvantaged sections of society at that time.
Experiments with, what was the word?
Diet for nutritional sufficiency.
Diet, what was the word for nutrition?
Nutritional sufficiency.
Well, Gandhi's ideas of nutrition changed. I don't think he developed this line of thinking very much. I'll tell you what he did do, what I can remember offhand. When he moved to, was getting ready to set up his center in Sevagram, yes? And he didn't yet have the Sevagram ashram set up, but he was planning to do that. So he was in the neighborhood and he had to decide, what are we going to eat? And so he found that the food sold in the market in the town wasn't very good. So he went out and got different kinds of food from the countryside, and he had his people try out these different kinds of food and tell him after several days how they felt. He conducted an experiment on how this vegetable, that vegetable, grown locally, was making you feel. And he put together from that experiment, which went on for some weeks, a sort of dietary scheme for what kind of food they would grow and buy and eat at Save-A-Grown. Yes? So this is obviously a message of localization. Test, stay with local produce, and go with the empirical evidence as to what to work. Now that's very different from shipping food halfway across the country for rich people in other parts of the country. Yes.
So basically, the sustainability was, I mean, like his concept, like in terms of nutrition, if we say.
Yes, and Gandhi was interested in village Swaraj as much as possible in various ways. That's a great big subject that takes on economic as well as public health aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sir, the next question by the viewer is, what inspired you to compile the particular book dedicated to Gandhi on health?
Well, that's a nice question. It's not very important, but I'm happy to answer. I have long been interested in medical health care and that kind of thing. My daughter, my father-in-law was an obstetrician, gynecologist, delivered lots of babies. My daughter is a pediatric neurologist. Yes. One of my best friends, one of my college roommates 60 years ago were all pre-med students, and they were brilliant. And one of them then proceeded to train all the doctors at one of the major teaching hospitals of Harvard University, Brigham and Women's Hospital, for 50 years. And I've been in touch with some of these roommates over the years. And I have a very close friend who was the head of a major private healthcare insurance company for 10 years. And so I've been following all this and talking with them about it all this time. In the meantime, I became a Gandhi scholar on one thing and another. And so the idea of putting these two things together came to me. And the key point for me was that I thought it shouldn't be Gandhi and health or Gandhi and health cure or Gandhi and nutrition or Gandhi and hygiene. It should be all four together because they were so closely interrelated in Gandhi's attitudes. Yeah, that was my starting point, and it took me 2 years to write the book, and that's why I got interested. I was interested in Gandhi, and I was interested in health and healthcare. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the last question will be, why do you feel modern education textbooks have lessons on first aid, but not on how to promote self-health?
Well, they are promoting it to some extent, but not enough. And the reason is quite clear. If everybody takes care of themselves so well, there will be much less income for the doctors to treat them. The doctors think about when the man comes to them, and then they go into medicine for two kinds of reason, always mixed. They want to help people and they want to make a lot of money. And the public health aspect, many doctors do devote themselves to public health, but the ones who are actually treating you, they're getting paid, and very well for it. Yes, and so there's just this gradual tendency to emphasize cure more than prevention. It's not that they're evil; it's just the way it works. Now there are some doctors who are greedy and evil that way. Yeah, but I think that's the reason. It's part of our capitalist system, and that's the only thing I can say. Now we come to this doctor I mentioned before, David Meltzer. Yes, yeah, yes. I admire him very much, and he put his finger right on the issue specifically with regard to primary care physician. You see, the primary care physician earns less money. It doesn't cost as much money to get an appointment in a hospital with a primary care physician as it does for the hospital to go to somebody else. So the patient, if the patient has money, or the insurance company has the money, the patient is delighted to be referred to the specialist, yes? Whereas if the patient got to know the primary care physician well, the primary care physician could lean on the patient to take good care of himself. And I think that's the main message that Gandhi has to give to us. It's not the topic here. The topic in this talk was Gandhi's curative methods for people who are already sick. But actually, the really basic lesson of what Gandhi had to say about this is what he said about the human body being a Kurukshetra and a Dharmakshetra. He said the human body is a Kurukshetra. Well, every doctor knows that. It's called the immune system. A Kurukshetra and a Dharmakshetra. And Gandhi said, insofar as it is a Dharmakshetra, it is your duty to take good care of it. Yeah? That's the real message, the deepest message. And we should all take that message to heart. We who are in the middle class, who are not starving for lack of nutrition, we should take care of ourselves, because the more of the doctor's time and the government's money that is spent on caring for us middle class folks because we didn't take care of ourselves properly, the more of that time and money that is spent on us because of our not having taken good care of ourselves, the less will be available to take care of the destitute people, who get sick just because they can't possibly get enough food. Their hygiene, the circumstances of hygiene are so inferior and so on. So it's up to us to take good care of ourselves, and then it's good for the others too, who really need it. If I may say that is my final message of this webinar, I would be, I hope that is something that all the middle class people who have computers and can watch this webinar take to heart. Yes, then that would be my parting word to all of us, please. I'm 83 years old, and I do gymnastics every morning. I watch my diet, one thing and another, and I have various illnesses, but I'm trying to take care of myself, not just for myself, also for the others. Thank you.
That's what is more important. So, but taking the takeaway from the question answer session, like I must say, it's one of your saying which you have said in your book, that anyone who observes the rule of health will not need to knock at the doors of doctor from day to day.
That was a slight exaggeration.
Yes.
Gandhi could sometimes exaggerate in his enthusiasm. The fact is that now and then you can take good care of yourself and follow all the good rules, moderate diet, blah, 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 everything else, hygiene, so on, and you have bad luck and get a disease. It can happen. Sheer bad luck can give diseases to people who follow all the good rules. But statistically, it will be much less. So from a public health point of view, the message is valid. It's just that it's not a 100% true statement that if you take good care of yourself, you'll never have to go to a doctor. Sometimes you do have to go to a good doctor, even though you've been taking good care of yourself. Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir. It was my honor to moderate the session with you. So I really thank you from my side and from the National Institute of Naturopathy, Pune. So tomorrow we will be there with the new session, with the new webinar and with new speaker. So at the same time, same platform. So everyone, please stay tuned with us. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.